We've got the prerequisite cat. Cats love Zoom. I see it there, Taj. If there's a Zoom meeting going, a cat is going to walk in front of it.
That's what they do. Doesn't matter how hard it is, like to keep them out, like you have to close it. I can't close the door right now. So she's preventing me from doing anything productive. That's their jobs.
I had a friend once at one point in time told me that dogs have owners and cats have staff. And I absolutely believe that.
True. Let's stop sharing for a second. Wait about maybe one more minute and then we'll get started to be respectful of your time. All right, someone's just in the process of joining and we're going to get started. This is being recorded.
All right, I think we're good, Doreen.
All right, so welcome to our second webinar. We're going to be focusing on impacts of computing. And I'm Doreen P.H. Rantoni, NYSCATE facilitator by night and Monroe Mombosi's employee by day.
Hi, everyone. Obviously, Parker. And I apologize. I have a friend of mine who's staying in my guest room, which is also my office. So I have to do this from my living room couch. And so not being unprofessional, just have to have a place in my house to do this. But hi, good to see everyone this month. I hope everyone has been doing well since we last talked to you in September, and I hope everyone's kind of feeling more, kind of like the routines. I had parent-teacher conferences this afternoon, so things are fine. I think once I hit that point in my year, things are kind of feeling a little more stable. So I hope you guys are all feeling that way as well.
And why don't we have our NYSCATE coaches introduce themselves as well?
Sure, I'll jump in. Good to see everybody starting to really recognize some names. Debbie Baker, as Doreen said, NYSCATE coach.
And Rich Hughes also jumping in as a coach here, recovering superintendent, and working with some ed tech companies to get them moving in the right direction. So I'm looking forward. I'll be sending an email out to all you that I will be coaching within the next 24 hours so we can schedule our first time together.
All right, so I am going to share my screen. All right, so we talked about today's focus being the impacts of computing concept area. Just welcome everybody, and we're going to have a very quick welcome activity. has to do with cats, so Taj can relate to this one. So which kitty are you today? You can put it right in the chat, what number? I would say 3 seems like sleepy, groggy, maybe grumpy, I guess. We have some 2 3s. Yeah, a lot of ones out there. Good. 1 and 2. The annoying level of 1, Rich.
2 is just scary. I hope for those of you that are 2s, you just, this is a temporary condition for you.
All right, looks like we have input from everyone and someone just joined, so it looks like they're entered. That's good. All right, so what we're really going to do during these next few months is just dig into the different concept areas and really focus on creating rationales, providing examples of lessons for the specific concept area that we're focused on. That doesn't mean that those lessons don't fall into other concept areas, and we're definitely going to illustrate that. I did have somebody send me an example of a lesson and how they wrote the rationale and put it on the portfolio. Feel free to do that. We don't want you to angst overly too much about this portfolio. And we're going to work with you every step of the way to be successful. Between Parker and I and Debbie and Rich, we're really going to help you, get that mastery over these standards. And part of that is the portfolio, the rationale. So we know you really comprehend how that particular standard aligns to this lesson, as well as creating lessons that we can share to the rest of the state through our repository. So,
and just like Doreen said, like the point of this is to show you how, not that it's easy, but just how it's a little more simple than I think that we want. It's a little more simple than I think some of you think it is to do this, because you're already doing a lot of this stuff, and just how to kind of incorporate some of these standards into some of the lessons that you're already planning on doing and how they connect, and then how you are going to be able to show us that and explain that to us. So again, like the whole point of this is to really work with you, like Doreen said, and to just kind of ease you a little bit into it, because it's just, this is to help you. Nothing that we're doing, you're going to have to work a little bit to fail this type of portfolio type situation. Like, that's not a lot that you can do for us to be like, oh, you don't get any of this. Like what you got, we're just helping you find a way to create a lesson, to integrate these standards, and then to share with us that you know it. So again, we just don't want anyone to fret over this.
yeah.
There is no reason to be worried about this, to fret over it. Yes, it's a little, there's some work you're going to have to put into it, 100%. But we just don't want anyone to be so nervous about it that they don't know if they can do it. That type of situation. So we just want to ease you a little bit.
So we have a question from Susan. It says, can we submit 2 lessons each quarter into our portfolio? If you share your folder, like we talked about, you created a folder that you're going to be sharing with us, and you're putting your lessons in there, and you're adding those lessons on your portfolio, send us an email. Can you look at these? You're not going to be officially submitting your portfolio until the end of our time together, but you certainly can have us look them over, and we can give you any feedback if we feel that you're not going in the right direction. Parker and I are going to be the ones evaluating these. We got to know you a lot in, during our summertime, and we're getting to know you more during these webinars. So, we get the idea of what you're doing in your classrooms and things like that. So we don't want you to worry about it. We're going to be working with you every step of the way. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. And if you
And-
want to share things with us, feel free to share things with us.
Another question we have from Teresa, if we're working with someone, do we both need to submit or just one of us with both names on it? You both need to submit, because even if you're working with somebody for all your lessons, you both are submitting your own portfolio. So you both have to submit it. And again, like, you're gonna explain a little bit that some of your rationales might be a little different than the other person's. Like, we don't want one person to create a portfolio and then somebody else just copy it. Like, we don't want that. But you guys, if you're working with, if Doreen and I were doing this together and we did all of our lessons together, that would be fine. But we both are submitting it ourselves in our own portfolio, so our own copies of the lesson as well. And then we're having our own rationales. Your rationales could be similar. That's okay, because you're doing it together, but we just don't want a carbon copy. But all the lessons could be the same as somebody else if you're planning them with somebody else. Does that make sense? All right.
Okay, so as we work together today, we're just going to remember the norms that we created during the cohorts for the summer. I'm not going to post those or anything. We remember what they are, and they are posted in the Google site. And now we're going to just get into our learning targets. So I can integrate impacts of computing standards into plugged or I should have put or there, unplugged activities. And I can align an impacts of computer standard to Bloom's taxonomy, which we're going to show you this process that we have that will help you create your rationale. All right, so we'll start having you think about that standard, the actions that the students are taking, and then that could be actually part of your rationale. And we'll show you how we did that with an example lesson and an example activity. So Parker, you want to talk about the lesson you created, and I'll pull it up.
Yep. So Doreen's gonna pull up a lesson. So this is just an example. Again, this is an example lesson. And this is the information we're looking for when you guys are submitting your lessons to us. And so this lesson actually hits 2 standards for the impacts of computing. And then it also hits a standard for computational thinking. We're only going to talk about the impacts of computing ones for today, but this is an example of a way that you can hit 2 of the sub-concepts for impact computing with one artifact.
So I'm going to make this a little bigger so everybody can see. So he used the template.
And again, a lot of this is very similar to how you, what you did over the summer when you guys created your lessons. So we're using that same template, and you're gonna notice, like, sometimes there might be things within the lesson plan that you don't have an answer for. That's okay. Like, so this is a 3rd grade lesson that I created, so it hits the 2nd, 3rd grade grade bands. I didn't really have a course name, and so you don't have to fill every single piece when it comes to those things. You can just fill in what you believe is affected by your lesson and what should be included for your lesson. So, we, just like when you're creating any lessons, we have the learning objectives. We have an optional essential question. Obviously, because it's optional, you don't have to do that. Your I can statements, can be very similar to your objectives. Again, we don't want you to just go reinvent the wheel and do everything like that. We want you to take lessons that you plan on already doing and maybe integrating and adapting them a little bit and changing them up to add some of these standards. When you put in your content standards, you can just do very similar to what we did. You don't have to list your content standards by copy and pasting everything. Just list them this way. You don't have to put the full standard or anything like that. Again, We're not doing this. We're not making you guys do busy work. If somebody really doesn't know what these standards are, they can look them up and figure them out. So we just want you guys to know when you're doing the content standards, we're going to give you guys time to read through this lesson and take a look at it. We're just kind of going through the different parts of it. When it comes to the computer science and digital fluency standards, we do want you to list those. That is what we're really working on right now. And so, and this is very simple, copy and paste. We just want you to copy your standard identifier. Remember, we've talked about that, the standard identifier, and then we just want you to put in, oh yeah, I'm not sharing my screen, so you can't see my cursor when I try to move it. And then we want you to also just put the standard. But again, on the document online that's in the site, you'll be able to just to copy and paste that. But we would like you to put that on because remember, all of these lessons are going to be shared around the state. So we want people to be able to know what computer science and digital fluency standards you're hitting. So we want to make sure you do that. If you take a look at my standards quickly, like I said, I'm hitting up 2 impacts of computing standards. So standard 2 and standard 4. And then I'm also hitting 1 computational thinking standard. So technically, if I wanted to, I would use this artifact for subconcept 2, subconcept 4 of impacts of computing, and subconcept 5 of computational thinking. So again, we just want you to also think about, because you're going to be reusing some of these lessons to hit multiple standards, because you're no more than 9 lessons can be submitted. We also add, again, we have the SEL benchmarks there. For the SEL benchmarks, a big part of the grant is also that you are able to add these and you have an understanding. They're not the focus, but they are. We want to make sure you do have an understanding of these social emotional learning benchmarks and goals. So we do want you to also list this. And I believe, like, right, Dorian, this could just be copy and pasted.
Yeah.
As well. So we just want that. We want those listed. And then if you just look down at the instructional plan, again, we just want a very basic layout of the lesson. Doreen and I are not in the lessons with you guys, so we don't know 100%. We don't know exactly what's supposed to happen or what you're supposed to do. So we just want you to be able to give us a brief-ish overview of what the lesson would look like. You don't have to go so deep. This is not an observation lesson or anything like that where you might go a little deeper, but we just want, a bullet pointed overview of what is going to happen in the lesson. So we have an understanding, we would be able to picture what should happen within this lesson. So I just don't want anyone to kill themselves doing step by step by step by step by step what you would be doing in the lesson. We just want somebody to be able to pick up this lesson and understand how to run it and be able to kind of make some of their changes if they want to it. Because again, it's going to be shared with people around the state. And then the background or prior knowledge section, again, doesn't have to be super deep. Like for this activity, it's basically the only background prior knowledge that the students really need is an understanding of how to use Seesaw for online activities in the classroom, because we were talking about using Seesaw. We also will be maybe using Padlets, so the students will also understand how to create maybe a Padlet or how to add to a Padlet, those type of things. So that's really some of the background information. It can be as deep as you feel like we need to know to understand what the students need. This is the first lesson in an activity, so there wasn't too much prior knowledge needed for this. And then we have any instructional tools that, instructional tech tools that are being used. Again, you don't have to use instructional tech tools. Just because this is, I think Doreen and I talked a lot about this during the summer. The technology is supposed to enhance the lesson. So if you don't feel like the technology is enhancing the lesson, but you're still hitting the standards, then maybe you don't have technology in it. And that is okay. You know your kids, we don't. So you're actually running these lessons. So I put some optional tech that could be used within this. When I ran something similar to this, I did it with multiple classes, and some classes we used tech and some classes we didn't, because some of the kids learned better without the tech, and they just wanted chart paper, and that worked better for them. You know your kids. So we don't want people to worry or focus too much on the tech. That is not the point of this. The tech is just like everything we talked about this summer, only if it enhances your lesson or your activity.
So one thing also to think about here, and I know this has been mentioned or people have asked the question in the past, if you have templates that you use with this lesson, make sure when you're adding the link for that, like the share link, that you're adding it as view only, so the people when we share these lessons can make a copy of it to use with their learners. So if there's things that you're using that are integral to the lesson, that might be a paper copy of something, but you're sharing it as a link, make sure it's view only so that people can have access.
And then for the materials and resources, this can also, so sometimes this material and resource section, this is where you're going to put some templates. This is also where you can put examples. So Doreen, can you pop up the chart for a second? You have the portfolio chart. So just this could be used as the evidence of student work when we're talking about that. So we're going to talk more about that later, but within this lesson, we put an example, and that example could also be used as your evidence of student work for their portfolio. So you can kind of, again, we don't want to make extra work for you. So if you don't have a full template, but you have an example that you think will give the other teachers in the state a better understanding of what you did and how to run this with their class, that's what you can use in that section. Because the other teachers aren't seeing this portfolio page. This is just for me and Doreen. So if you have a really good example of student work that you think will help another teacher in another state, in another district understand better, then that's where you're going to put that. So you're also putting it there, but it can be, doesn't have to be something different. So we just don't want you to think you have to do double work.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to put you in breakout rooms, and I'm going to share the link of this lesson in the chat. And you're going to, as a group, look over the lesson. And then we also have a reflection document that you're going to fill out in your breakout room, where the standards are in the lesson. So specifically what activities the students are doing in the lesson that Parker has detailed are aligned to the standards that he put into that lesson. So you're going to look over the lesson, you're going to look at the list that Parker created of the what the students are going to be doing, and you're going to look at the standards that he aligned the lesson to, and you're going to like say the students are doing this specific activity during this lesson, and that aligns to this standard.
And remember, we're really focusing, we want you guys to focus more on the 2 standards for impacts of computing. So the first 2 standards. We don't have to worry about the computational thinking one right now.
Right. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to add the editable document for the reflection in the chat as well, so you have access to that. Does anybody have any questions on what we want you to do in your breakout room? Okay, so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. And I'm going to, how many minutes, Parker?
Oh, let's do 10.
Okay. Just letting some people in. It looks like some people popped out, so I want to make sure everybody's in before I hit the breakout rooms.
And 1 second, Doreen, I'm resharing the lesson link.
Okay.
Is it 10 minutes for the reflection and looking at the lesson? Or is the reflection for later?
The reflection is for now. When you're going into your breakout room, you're going to look at just those activities, the standards aligned to it, and then fill out that reflection. We'll give you 12 minutes. All right, so I'm going to open rooms.
And you're doing it as a group.
Parker, I'm going to pause recording. Please, please, please remember recording. So I don't forget. Okay, it looks like people are almost done popping back in. Okay, so I am going to, I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so we have our different groups here that have added their content. So group one, would you like to share a little bit about your thinking process and then how you think this lesson aligns, the activities align to the standards? Anybody from group one? I should have had you guys assign a presenter. Next time we'll do that.
I'll start. So we definitely identified impacts of computing to establishing rules to computational technology. Right off the bat, just with the initial conversation about rules and why they're important and why we have rules, you're setting the tone for a conversation about rules as it relates to computer tech. There was a lot that we saw also about public and private space in the school and online that we identified as IC4. You're on mute, Billiam.
Oops, I'm sorry, Bill, I
Thank
muted
you.
you by accident.
No, it's okay. I was doing that wait time for group one, so it's fine. We were also talking about in the Padlet how those specific questions really relate to the public spaces versus private spaces. And then also specifically getting right to that last question of what is the difference between a public and private online space.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we'll go to group three. Who would like to speak for group three?
Hey, Doreen, before group three jumps in, just so you know, group two, long story, but anyway, we didn't fill this in, but we had a conversation. So we can present.
Okay, go ahead. If you want to present, go ahead and present.
Okay, all right. So
Group three
anyway, our
looked great.
comments, well, we were kind of juggling between multiple screens and many of us couldn't access the lesson plan individually. So we had a share of the actual lessons. So we didn't, which is why the notes didn't make it into this note catcher.
No
So
worries.
anyway, a lot of our conversation, we went down through, obviously looked at the standards like all of you all, read the various kind of learning targets and specific activities, really had a conversation around, looking at, and I believe it was bullet 4, as well as, I'm going to make it up, maybe 7, like the last bullet, and how they related to the standards. But then we almost got into a nuts and bolts of portfolio presentation. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask, provide or use this time to ask our specific questions. One of the ideas this group had was, would you and Parker like to see, so as we articulate like kind of the lesson and the kind of the specific steps in the lesson, almost highlight and through a color coding, which standards they align to. So for instance, bullet 4 specifically aligned to the initial, I think it was the IC2 standard. So do that kind of a color coding and really kind of make that connection and build that relationship for you. And then the next question we had and we're wondering is, so again, Parker, an example you showed us, there were 7 or 8 bullets, many of those we could kind of actually visualize how the lesson was going through. How in depth do you want us to go? Or do you want them to go at that point in time? My thought was you all will need a context, right? You need to
Right.
know kind of how things are happening, but it doesn't want to, you don't need every 5-minute breakdown of, and then say this, and then like a script. So
Exactly. We don't need a script. We also don't need, I'm going to do this part for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to do this part for 5. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need a breakdown like that. That's why I just wanted to show just the simple bullet points of, because again, Doreen and I aren't in your rooms. We don't know what you're doing fully. And so we need to be able to look at it and visualize the lesson, like Debbie just said, but also we would like somebody else who doesn't even know your districts, someone else in the state. We want them to be able to pick this up and be able to also visualize it, so then they can then adapt it for their class type situation.
So the first question you had, Debbie, you can either highlight it if you want, or when you list the standards, you can type here the Padlet, the Padlet activity is how the students will meet this particular standard. So
Okay.
you can list the standards and how learners will meet the standards right within this area, or you can color code it however you want to do that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important for us to know, like, what are they doing that's actually going to meet the standard, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
And then the other part, Parker, we kind of talked about initially was, it seemed as though you took a lesson, and I think you've already said this, so we're just kind of reinforcing what you said. You took a lesson that you had already done, and you figured out a way how to embed 1 or 2 of these standards, which was the actual, take a look at the Seesaw environment or your LMS. How do the rules change within that environment? So, you were able to take like I said, an existing lesson and really just kind of figure out what that meant in a digital environment.
Exactly. And I just, made some changes. And even, like I said, even if I didn't use the technology for that lesson, because my kids will be using technology later, I still wanted them to know how the rules when they're in that virtual environment.
Sure.
So
Okay.
so don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. You can. If you want to create a brand new lesson that you've never done before or anything like that, feel free. But we don't want you to think you have to reinvent that wheel.
Sure, and that actually came up, and because one of our group members talked about how she did some phenomenal curriculum writing this summer, right? And could that be used? And my response, and I hope it's okay, Dorian Parker, I said absolutely, but not at the unit level. I don't know what the curriculum, but at almost the individualized, the manifestation of that unit. Pull out, one of those lessons that you would be teaching.
100%. That's exactly it, Debbie. Yeah.
Okay, so group two, let me know if I didn't represent, pop in if you've got something to add.
All right, let's go to group number 3. I don't remember who was in each group. I'm sorry.
I can share. I don't mind sharing.
Thank you.
So a lot of these I think were shared by group 1 as well, but some of the activities we noticed, one of which were compare and explain rules, where the students are creating rules for the classroom and then they're doing a similar activity to create rules for using different technology tools. So they're looking at rules in both different settings, identifying the public and private space, of course, just in that really good example of what would you share in a classroom show and tell versus an online show and tell, and how, you know, the audience for those two things are very different. One is a private audience and one is a public, and which things stay private and which things stay public. And the last one, identify the essential details. I kept thinking of like that algorithm word we talked about this summer, and that I saw that a lot in the task analysis activity, where after completing the rules, allow them to see the rules in action. So, you know, creating a task analysis for each. I keep thinking of like routine or process that you use in the classroom.
All right, thank you very much. And let's go to group 4. Make this a wee bit smaller. There we go. Whomever would like to share, be great.
All right, well, we just kind of went through the 3 standards that were in the lesson plan. And we went through the different activities that the kids are doing and then kind of a little sort activity to pop them into wherever it really made sense. While they're pretty applicable across like 2 different standards, if you want to interpret it that way. But we just picked the ones that kind of made sense first.
All right, thank you very much. So yeah, so this is just an activity to help you really think about as you're going to be either adapting and facilitating your lessons or creating lessons, how to think about how to structure them for this work that we're doing together. And then, you know, really looking at the standards and still getting that fluency with the standards.
And
So go ahead, Parker.
oh, also, it's just like Doreen said, it's for you to look at and seeing how they were integrated, but also we are also okay if you use these as jumping off points to help you maybe create. If you don't have a lesson that you think fits something, you can don't copy our lessons, you know, like that, but you feel free to use that as a jumping off point. You know, definitely we are also sharing it with you for a reason. So if you are like, I'm just, you know, sometimes you might just feel stuck and you just don't know. And so we want these to help, you know, maybe just kind of give you that jump start. Or maybe you're like, I actually really like this activity. I would change it a little bit for my class, but feel free to also do that. So we just want you to also use these if you really are starting to feel stuck.
All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to be looking at Bloom's taxonomy and looking at how we might be able to use this tool to this graphic organizer that we have to help you start thinking about creating that rationale for each of the standards, so that are the lessons that you're going to be adding. So we have this graphic organizer that gives you some very basic guidance on how to fill out just this basic sentence using one of the standards. So I would look at one of the impacts of computing standard concept area standards and use it to practice creating this sentence. So I have an example for you, just so you understand what I'm talking about. So I took the lesson that Parker created, and I took the standard for impacts computing concept area, and I just filled in the responses. So by Friday, students will be able to define. So I looked at the verb and Bloom's taxonomy here. What rules for in-person and online virtual environments? What are the rules? Sorry. So that's the content, the concept, or the skill, as evidenced by creating a poster of rules with words and images. So I'm taking that lesson and some of the activities from that lesson that align with this particular standard and making a sentence out of it. I can then take this sentence and use it as part of my rationale. So it's a good practice for you to look at as you're looking at your lessons that you create in the standards that you align them to, and then thinking about that rationale. This is a kickoff for that rationale. So, we don't want your rationales to be paragraphs long. They could be 3 to 4 sentences, maybe even 2 to 3, if you can really boil down the rationale for that particular activity. So what we're going to have you do is we're going to put you in breakout rooms once again. We're going to give you the link to the standards, and you're going to go to page 20. That's where the impacts of computing start. And you're going to look at any of the standards in that concept area and obviously those sub concepts. And you're going to find one standard as a group, and you're going to complete this chart. And you're going to obviously determine as a group what concept or skill, and then what that assessment or product is going to be at the end. This is an imaginary lesson that you're going to be creating this for. We're not going to be using Parker's lesson. We're going to be thinking about this by having the standard direct you to complete this activity. So we'll provide you with the link to the standards, and you'll go to page 20. We're going to provide you with an editable template. Please, I'm sorry, you make a copy of this template, and then we'll share it out when we come back. So make sure you have a presenter in mind for that. And you feel free to we'll send you a link to this if you want to use it whenever you're doing your rationale for any of your lessons. You can feel free to go through this process for each one. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can get you those links.
So I'm gonna the Bloom's link. I'm gonna send that now.
Okay, is it a view only so they make a copy? I might have given you the wrong link. I apologize.
Okay, let me look then real fast. Sorry, guys. So all this is happening in real time. I will make a view only. All right, so I'm sending the Bloom link in the chat for everybody, and this is the view only. So you're gonna have to make at least one person has to make a copy of this. But
I have the standards one, Parker. Okay.
Yep. I would also we're also gonna send the same link tomorrow. Well, when we send you an email with some of the resources, just so you have this on file for you to have. It's a really helpful document.
All right, so we've put in the chat, we put the link to the Bloom's activity, and then also the link to the standards PDF, and you want to go right to page 20, so you get to that impact of computing concept area. So page 20 will bring you right to this start of the concept area with the subconcepts, and you're going to take any of these standards. So as a group, you're going to decide which standard you want to look at in what concept area, and then you're going to complete that activity. Does anybody have any questions? All right, so I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and we're going to do We're gonna do 3 to, I'm gonna do 7 breakout rooms. How much time, Parker?
Oh my goodness. Let's do 12? 10? I don't know. You put me on the spot for this. I'm not
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. We're gonna do 12 minutes.
okay. I just yelled out a number that you told me last
All
time.
right, and then let us know if you have any questions when you're in the rooms, we can pop in there. Parker, I'm gonna pause record. I resumed recording, Parker.
Okay. I'm glad I reminded you.
All right, so we're still waiting for some more people to pop back in. I think we're missing 2 people. Let me see. All right, so let's start with breakout room number 1. Oh, we saw some people popping in here. So that would be Bernadette, Susan, Mackenzie, and Rebecca. You want to, you can share your screen. I made it so that everybody could share their screen.
I'll talk, Bernadette, if you want to share your screen.
I think Bernadette's a little busy.
Bernadette, uh-oh. I can't see
Very
Bernadette.
cute.
That's not a
Very
good sign,
cute.
is it?
That's all right.
You see it in the chat? Can you pull it up?
Here, I'll pull it up. All right, let me share my screen. All
I'm
right.
still in the process of typing, but
Oh, okay.
if you want to go from there.
So who wants to talk about it?
I can talk about it if you want.
Okay.
Alrighty. I got the opportunity to work with many elementary teachers and am always amazed at how much I learned in such a short period of time. So thank you. We were doing a lesson where we were having the young ones compare and contrast using a Venn diagram. And we were having them having them compare the technology from 2010 in a classroom to 2020. So this would take either a little research or a little video clip, something where the kids could get that 2010 experience. And then previous learnings, they would have to know how to do a Venn diagram and know what it means to compare and contrast.
Okay, so like looking
So-
here.
It's under analysis. There it is, compare and contrast.
Yeah, compare and contrast. So they would do the compare and contrast. The content would be technology from different eras, right? Or different
Right.
years.
Changes
And
in
then-
technology, yeah.
Yeah, and then the evidence would be a mini lesson on technology by creating a Venn diagram. So that's good. And then you could use that sentence. So you wouldn't say by Friday in your rationale, but you would say students will be through this artifact. You know, this artifact illustrates how students will be able to compare and contrast the different technologies or the change or shift in technologies as evidenced by a mini lesson on technology in 2010 versus 2020. And they will create a Venn diagram to illustrate their knowledge, right? To illustrate their learning. And you could even say if it was a collaborative project or an individual project or something like that, but you get the idea. All right, thank you very much, group one. Group two, I'm gonna stop sharing. You can share your own screen if you can. That's Christina, Ellen, Maria, and Taj. So if one of you wants to share your screen and then someone else can.
Am I group two?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't get it all typed in because I'm totally chatty and I'm always blah, blah, blah. Okay, so sorry about that, but I'm just going to explain the lesson that I did had to do with robots. This is a real life thing in my class. Had to do with robots and how they are all around us. And the example that I used was the smoke detector, the fire alarm box in my classroom. And as we were talking about it, what we came up with was this artifact would illustrate how there are many technologies that operate around us without human intervention. Once you set them up, I mean, it's not really without human intervention, you set them up to operate that way. So students will be able to explain the fire alarm as a robot that follows an algorithm using the sensors that it has to detect the number of smoke particles in the air. Students can make a diagram of a fire alarm and imagine how does it go, how does it know when to go off? And that's the idea of the sensor. That's what we've been studying. What is it detecting? And then how does it act? So robots follow the sense, compute, act cycle over and over again. And then students can compare and contrast their bodies with the fire alarm, having their eyes and their ears being able to see and hear the fire alarm system in the same way that the robot's sensors detect the smoke particles.
Sorry, I muted myself. So yes, and then you could use that as your rationale. Think about what standard it's aligning to and making sure that you take some of the verbiage from that standard and mix it in with that rationale, because using the verbiage of the standard allows you to illustrates to us that you have a comprehension of what that standard means, right?
But I thought I did that on the let me just okay, so where it says hang on one second. It's kind of hard.
You did, Ellen. I was just reiterating that process. Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, you're good. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to mute some people because I'm getting some feedback here. Okay, good. There we go. All right. Thank you, group two. Let's go to group number three. That's Cheryl, Corrine, Teresa, and Bill.
So we were having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to put our response in the chat so we can read it from there.
Okay.
So we looked at, by Friday, students will be able to create a list to identify multiple jobs that use computing technologies, as evidenced by presenting a poster created in groups.
Great. So you have the computing technology, the jobs in computing technologies. That's definitely impacts of computing standard. And you're talking about what they're going to be creating, what they're going to be identifying, and then the evidence of their knowledge. So that assessment or product. Great job. Thank you very much. The next one is group 5. That's Jennifer, Debbie, Kim, and Stephanie.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And we were talking about looking at basically how reading has changed. And so looking at different reading experiences. Students use Raz Kids and Sora and Epic, and then adults use their phones to read books or tablets. So we said by Friday, I just put in Friday, we didn't have an actual date. Students will be able to compare what different reading experiences as evidenced by presenting and teaching. So we'll have the students, after they look at these different modes and experiences for reading, and they will create a concept graphic organizer or a Padlet illustrating at least 3 different types of reading experiences.
Excellent. And then you just pop that, you put this artifact in this artifact illustrates how students will, and that is a great way to start writing your rationale. And sometimes you will be able to be so concise that, 1 or 2 sentences will work with your rationale. All right, thank you so much. And let's go to Annie, Dale, and Marjorie.
All right, I can share my screen.
Okay.
All right, so we looked at 4-6 IC1, and we said, again, like most groups, by Friday, we just figured after a week, students will be able to analyze how computing technologies influence and are influenced by society and culture, as evidenced by discussing with a group and creating a collaborative document or a Padlet. And we left it more broad depending on what technology they use, so we could be more specific later.
Great. So great activity and great way of adding in the verbiage from the standard. Thank you so much. All right, now group number 7, Aaron, Ashley, and Jonathan.
We took a more meta approach and we talked about just this experience as a whole, this lesson that we were doing. Let me share my screen, I guess. I could actually just read it. By the end of the breakout session, students will be able to describe computing technologies that have changed the world and express how those technologies influence and are influenced by cultural practices, as evidenced by creating a learning target template that we all just did.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Those were great examples. Looks like you're kind of you're understanding how this can work as your rationale by pulling in, using that Bloom's taxonomy and weaving it in with the standard language. So I'm just going to show you real quick because we're getting a little tight on time here, and I want Debbie to be able to share some information about coaching. So this is, and we'll send you the link tomorrow with this, but this is what, how we aligned the lesson that Parker created. We added the standard identifier where it falls. So it met 2 of the impacts of computing, the sub-concept areas. One was society and one was ethics, and then also one with computational thinking. We did not write a rationale for that because we really wanted to focus on the impacts of computing concept area. So Parker created a rationale for how it met this particular standard that he listed here. He listed the link to the lesson and then the link to an artifact that will illustrate what the students were interacting with. So this link could be images, videos, a document of student work. So within this Padlet, students would be interacting and teachers would be able to see that. And then we did it again for the IC4, and we have the standard listed here, and then this rationale illustrates how this lesson aligns to this particular standard. So go ahead, Parker.
I said the biggest thing we want to show you guys when it comes to this is, so we had 2 of the sub-concept areas. We have 2 different rationales. However, the lessons and the evidence are the same. So again, you're not going to have to show a different evidence thing if it's the same lesson. That lesson, whatever the evidence is, that evidence is going to be evidence for the 2 sub-concepts for impacts of computing and the sub-concept for computational thinking that we chose it for. So we just want to make sure, again, don't do extra work if you don't have to. It's the same for every lesson. You're going to have 1 piece of evidence, and every time you use that lesson within this this rubric, you're going to this portfolio, you're going to put the same piece of evidence. Because I don't want anyone to make it harder for themselves. So I really want to just hit that home, that it's 1 piece of evidence per a lesson.
So Parker and Doreen, quick question, because I can imagine it coming up. As far as the evidence goes, and maybe we can talk in another session about like what types of evidence, are you looking at are you looking for actual student work as evidence? Or are you looking for, this is going to sound benign, but like pictures of kids engaged in conversation or little videos, because it might have been an introductory lesson that didn't necessarily result in some type of a product?
Either
So,
or.
Yeah, whatever makes the most sense
Okay.
Either
for
or.
that lesson, the rationale and that standard.
Yep. It's really open to you guys to decide what you think the evidence is.
All right, coaching, you're up, Debbie. I'm going to stop sharing so you can just have a conversation.
Great. Just again, really a couple of 2 or 3 really quick updates. You met Rich a little bit earlier. I'm not sure if he's still on the screen. Rich and I looked at kind of like the lineup and what made the most sense as far as from a geographic standpoint. So if I'm going to be working with you, I'm working right now with East Arundecoit, Honeyway Falls, Pittsford, Brighton, and East Rochester. And Rich is going to be working with all the folks from BOCES in the myriad of locations that they are out there, as well as West Arundecoit and Fairport. And I know, speaking for me, but I think Rich said he was going to reach out today. I've spent this week reaching out to each one of you. Sometimes it's in groups and in teams, kind of trying to set up meetings, the bulk of which I'm hoping for next week. So if you have not heard from me and you're in East Arundecoit, HFL, Pittsburgh, Brighton, or ER, please shoot me a chat right now and say, Deb, I haven't heard from you, because I think, like I said, I've made the initial reach out. Want to plan on solidifying those meetings, and then you'll be hearing from me kind of a confirmation. I will see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock at such and such a time. As far as these initial meetings, really, it's just not only it's getting to know you and kind of meeting you in your location, but also kind of talking a little bit about maybe hoping to share. What have you been doing about trying to implement some of these standards? And it's okay to say, you know what? All I've been doing for the first 6 weeks of school is just trying to figure it out. And that's okay. I know I've heard back from a few of you saying, I really haven't delved into this yet. Okay. Absolutely okay. We're still really early in the school. And as we said this summer, our role is really to help you and to support the work you're doing. So my hope for these initial meetings is to kind of maybe a share. What have you been doing? What are you thinking about? How do you think Rich and I can support you in this work? And talk, specifics to your position, your role, because that's the other piece is you all are in so many different roles that it's going to look differently. I would also invite you to, if outside of even like a formal coaching session, if something's happening in your building that like all of a sudden something is culminating and you would love one of us to be there, please, 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 shoot us an email. I know, speaking for myself, if at all possible, I'd love to be there just to kind of see what you're doing, what the kids are doing, and how this work is all playing out. So again, really wanting this to be very fluid, very individualized, based upon what you feel would best help you to create the lessons, as well as to, get the work done that Doreen and Parker have outlined. And then I would just open it up if anybody's got any quick questions for me. Like I said, this is kind of my 2 minutes of blurbage. Okay.
All right. So you want to go ahead, Parker?
Yep. So as we wrap up, we just want to do a quick closing, and it's going to be something very simple, then we can be out of here. So basically, all we want you guys to do is we're going to do a virtual fist to 5. In the chat, if you want to just put, we want to know how you're feeling, your comfort level right now when it comes with moving forward with impacts of computing, and maybe coming up with a lesson for that and filling out a rationale, and just how you're feeling about what we went over today. So in the chat, this is going to be, everyone's going to see it, but Doreen and I are just going to kind of really look at it so we have a better understanding of where everyone's coming from. You can put a 0 if you just don't you're like, oh, I don't get anything that you said today. or what you said just didn't make any sense and I need some more help. 3 would be like, yeah, I have a good understanding and I feel like with the coaching, I'll be able to kind of move through this. And then 5 is, oh, I understand and I got this. All right. So if you want just a quick this to 5, 0 to 5, and then you can feel free to leave. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank
Really
you for joining
appreciate
us
your time.
today.